Hello, welcome to another episode of the Producing Half podcast, where we break down events, or so far we've just been going through topics, getting a baseline of, I guess, culture or belief system, but we do it in a way for the working class or the middle class, the producers out there, really. I was a working poor at one point in my life. My first job was $4.25 an hour. Not my first job, but my first W-2 job. Real job. We had a boss and everything. I worked every summer, but those were all like cash things or just with my father or something. But my first like real job, other than I worked at a restaurant briefly, but my first real job was $4.25 an hour. And that would have been at Best Products? Yeah, Best Products would have been the place. And also at a bowling alley as well. Yeah, just break down current affairs and just the world and everything from a working class producing American point of view. But today we're going to talk about inflation. And I started typing notes about this. Well, I was going to do some research today on it. I even Googled it and was about to open up a bunch of articles on it. And I said, well, let me just outline what I want to talk about. And I typed up an outline in, 2 minutes flat, and realized I don't need to do any research because I'm not going to get into the weeds. What I mean is I'm not going to get into the statistics of it or the mathematics of it or any of the, just the examples throughout history or things like that. I'm just going to go on it from a 50,000 feet view of it, just a view that every normal, average American should understand, and in a way that they could have a conversation about it and be correct without having to memorizing a bunch of stats. Because that's how they get you, is they're like, oh, you got this stat wrong. Like, okay, I'm sorry, I missed a decimal point, or I didn't get the exact to the 0.003% correct. But the gist of my argument's there. So we're not going to get into the weeds of it. We're not going to focus on the extreme details of it, per se. So inflation is an insidious tax on the poor, especially the poor, and even the middle class, maybe even to like upper middle class, but that'd be about it. Not necessarily on the rich or definitely not on the elites, but it is probably the worst tax on the poor. And you notice it when you go to the grocery store these days. I carried one bag of groceries out the other day, and it was three figures. It was over $100. And it was nothing, I didn't think it was anything. It was just things we needed. We don't even buy meat anymore. It's just too expensive. We just buy chicken, because chicken's still affordable. Or whatever's on sale or whatever's about to expire is the only real meat we get. Because we don't get any government assistance. We got to pay for it ourselves. Whenever the people buying the meat are either rich or they get government assistance. But the poor and the middle class are the ones who, I digress. The poor and the middle class are the ones who are most affected by by inflation. And it's really easy to see that, because what percentage of your income do you have to spend on necessities? For me, it's the vast majority of my income is spent on necessities. And for a rich person, or even an elite, depending on how you define rich, for me, rich is up there. Definitely, you're upper, depending on where you live. If you live in Manhattan, you make $500,000 a year, you're not rich, and you're lower middle class probably. But if you live in some rural Virginia, no, not Virginia, maybe Kentucky, Kentucky, and you make $500,000 a year, you're rich. It just depends on where you're living on that. But I'm talking about people who are making over $1 million a year. Their percentage of their income that they're spending on the necessities is much less. It's insignificant compared to what the middle class and the poor spend on necessities. And so inflation disproportionately affects the poor and middle class. They have to buy these things. These things are a percentage of their income, and when inflation affects these items, It affects their, their net disposable income. What they have to spend is significantly damaged by inflation. Not so much. And for the rich and the elites, there's lots of things. I'll get into some of the stuff in a little bit, but there's lots of things they do to protect themselves from inflation. I mean, you know inflation just from listening to your parents, because I remember my father talking about when he first met my mother, and they just had my older brother, and he worked for like $2 and something an hour as a security guard at UT, and had an apartment, bought groceries, had a car, would go out to the movies on Friday night, was, living the American dream. They weren't rich, they were working class people, but they weren't poor. They were able to pay for everything. They were on no government assistance. And so that is an example of inflation. Minimum wage, you could not support a family of three on minimum wage these days. It's an impossibility. It's a sad joke. And then if everybody who's a family of three on minimum wage is getting many thousands of dollars in government assistance. Well, we should probably stop calling it government assistance. To be fair, it should be called taxpayer assistance. It should be fellow Americans assistance, because the government has no money. They have no money. They have our money. It is our money that they have stolen from us. That's the only money the government has. So it's your money. So all government assistance is your money. So you understand inflation. Just talk to your parents on how they used to live and what everything's cost and what it costs now. And the thing about inflation is that your income doesn't keep up with it. What people make does not keep up with inflation. And inflation is it's already started. It's not in the news, or it's been a little bit hidden from the public, but inflation is already there. I see it in the price increases on everything that I do in my businesses, with my various contractors and stuff. And then I also see it with just the things that I buy, and the cost of things that I want to buy. Inflation is already here, and it is huge. It is not 2% or whatever they try to fake it with the numbers. Another thing you have to realize is that the dollar, since early 1900s, it's basically lost 95% of its value. So if you had a dollar back then, it's worth a nickel today. So that's a huge loss that's inflation. That's inflationary. And it really went out of whack after, I think it was Nixon, took us off the gold standard. For a while there was illegal to own gold. Can you imagine that? You had to turn in your gold. I need to look into that and read. I know that it's a truth, but I've never read about it all. I really need to study that, because that just seems, if they came and knocked on my door and wanted to take my 1 gram of gold, because that's all I've ever bought was 1 gram. It came in this fancy little square thing with some kind of certificate saying that it was real gold. They wanted to come take my 1 gram of gold from me, then we'd have a problem. You can't tell me what I can and cannot own. They do it with drugs, I guess. But since the gold standard is when the real inflation has taken effect, you have to understand the difference between money and currency. You're kind of arguing over semantics here, but you're not either. There is a difference between money and currency. And what we have in America is not money. Your dollar bill is not money. It's just currency. It's worse than just currency. It's fiat currency. And that just means that it only has a value because the government says it has value. But money has value in and of itself. Gold is an extreme example of money. For a long time you could buy things with gold coins or silver coins. Before, in the old days, you could just buy it. There was actually people who took gold. You could just walk in there and buy things with gold. So gold is a money. And then our dollars could be counted as money, I guess, whenever there was a gold standard. But that really is hard to say, because I think when Nixon took us off gold, our money was not backed by gold. It was officially backed by gold, but if we went in there and counted the gold in Fort Knox, we wouldn't have had enough. The same thing with silver these days. I think all the silver bought and sold on the stock market, or the COMEX, or whatever they call the exchange there, doesn't exist on Earth. But what we have is currency. You don't have any money. You have currency. Now it's just digital currency. I think they call that commercial currency or something, where it's just in your it's just a one and a zero. You don't actually they want to get rid of all physical currency for sure. And a lot of you have to understand, man, in order to truly appreciate inflation, you have to understand a little bit about the how our banking system works. We are in we have a fiat currency, we have a debt-based economy, and a fractional reserve banking system. So if you're not one of the bankers, if you're not one of the elites, and I give you $1,000, let's just do $100. If I give you $100, well, you have $100. You could loan somebody $100, and you only have $100. I give one of these special people, better than us, $100, bankers. If I put $100 in a bank, they then take that $100, reserve it, and loan $1,000. And so now they have $1,000, you say. Well, not really. They've loaned it out. But that $1,000 then gets deposited back in their bank, let's say. And so now they got the $1,000. Now they have $1,000 in that bank and $100 in that bank. Now that $1,000 that just got deposited in that bank that the guy hasn't spent yet, they can loan out $10,000 on that $1,000 deposit. 10% reserve is pretty average, I think. So that is fractional reserve banking. Now it's not so cut and dry as that. They have, the money that they loan out gets spent and taken everywhere else. But if you just think of the banking system as a whole as just one bank, then that is how it works. I give you $100, and they give that bank the $100. They loan out $1,000. That $1,000 goes back into the bank. They loan out $10,000. That $10,000 goes back in the bank. They loan out $100,000. They turn your $100 into a lot of money. Again, it's that the math is not accurate, and it's not 100% how it works, but it is close enough for how we understand it. And you're not them, so you've only got $100. Now I want my $100 back, by the way. So that's fractional reserve banking. That is how they take this money, this debt spending that they do, and it compounds out of control because of the way our whole banking system works. And this is not an economics course. I am not an economics professor. This is just, we're sticking below 101. This is not even high school 101. This is junior high 101. So don't get all specific on me and arguing that that I'm not accurate in how I'm describing it. This is just an overview so that you can have a conversation about it and kind of have a general understanding on how and what you're talking about. The thing that the part of the inflation I want to talk about is the stimuluses. The quantitative easing and all the money, the banking bailouts and the housing bailouts. The banking was horrific. Man, when are we ever going to stop putting up with the pure theft of all of our, not only our money, but our kids and our grandchildren's future? I mean, it's just how lazy and ignorant and apathetic as Americans we have become. Me as well, I guess. Although I am doing this podcast, so I'm doing something at least, and I'm voting and researching on how to vote and stuff like that correctly. And I guess I'll start doing more. It's just I work for a living. It's hard. Excuses. But the stimulus that they just did, this COVID stimulus, it's criminal. It's criminal what they did. It is a horrible, horrible crime committed on the poor and the middle class. It's complete theft of our money. It's complete theft of our future and our children's future. It is a horrible tax on us. It is going to cause huge inflationary periods. It is a horrible, horrible thing. So let me give you an example of what they did, the stimulus. Let's say you were walking down the street and I walked by and I pull out a gun and I say, you know what? I see you have $10,000 there. You give me that $10,000 or I'm going to shoot you. So you hand me over your $10,000. There's no place to go to, so you're just out of your $10,000. I've got it now. I see you a week later and you are, you're not doing well. I can tell you have an A, you don't have any money. So I feel bad. And I don't want you to die, and I don't want you to be so bad off that you go to extreme measures. So I'm going to give you $50 back. Like, here, you know what? This is stimulus money. You don't owe it back to me, man. Here's $50. And you're supposed to be thankful that I gave you $50 back. It was a week later, so maybe it wasn't a part of the $10,000 I stole from you, but I stole $10,000 for you, and I just gave you $50 back, and I called it a stimulus. Well, that's what they did to you. They took $10,000 from you, your politicians that we all vote for, and they gave you $50 back. And then they gave themselves the other $9,950. They gave it themselves in votes, because look what they did. They voted for a stimulus, so let's vote for us. They gave it to their friends, their corporate elites that tell them what to do. They gave them to foreign governments. Our stimulus, our money, our taxpayer dollars for the COVID relief stimulus went to some sort of gender study in Pakistan or something, and Saudi Arabia and all these other countries got our taxpayer dollars. They get them every year, but on something as an emergency as a COVID relief bill, and people did need money. People actually needed to go back to work. They needed to not shut down the economy. It's what they needed to do. But people did need some cash in their pocket for sure. I mean, $1,200 isn't going to do anything for you long term, but I guess at least it can get you some groceries in your fridge, and maybe, well, they couldn't be evicted, so I guess they couldn't turn your electricity off either. So I guess they just put some groceries in your fridge. Maybe you caught up on some bills or something. But that was what they did. That was your COVID stimulus. Enjoy it. Enjoy that $50 they gave you back. I know the numbers aren't what they are. People got $1,200 and $600 and $3,600, and they got some pretty large sums. And I bet the proportionality of what I'm saying is correct because of the inflation. So that money, there's only so many dollars out there chasing so many goods, and when they flood the economy with that much debt spending, a lot of people save that money. So then that money goes back into the banks and blah, blah, blah. We're back to the whole fractional reserve thing. A lot of people spent it. Everything is so much, you can't even get things. Not only that, people aren't going back to work. So it's hard to hire people to do things. I talked to so many people, and I'm like, hey, I need it. It's going to be a week before I can get that dirt over to that job site. I'm like, well, what do you mean a week? I need my caliche, and I can't even hire drivers. I'm offering to pay people more money than I've ever paid, and they won't do it. They're not working. Nobody wants to work. They're getting so much in unemployment. They don't want to go to work. I hear that from all the contractors and people I deal with, and some of the people I deal with do very, very hard jobs, and they don't get paid that a lot. I mean, it's manual labor. But it is hard. It's hard work. It's not skilled labor, but it's hard work. They can't get people to do it. They won't do it. They're getting paid too much. They're getting too much money to stay home and do nothing. And it's too easy. I know people who are playing the unemployment game right now. I personally know people who are not working and do not have any intention of working, and they can work. They even manipulated it so they would be out of work, so they can collect free money from the government. Our money, free taxpayer money. That is happening all over America. This economy is spinning out of control, and we're all just with our eyes closed, not even paying attention to it. But all this money they're pumping into this economy is going to cause huge inflation. There's nothing you can do about it. The rich will be fine. Corporations got most of our stimulus money. We got such a small fraction of it compared to what the corps got. The corporations got the vast majority of it. The politicians and all their friends. And that money filters back to the politicians and campaign donations and lucrative jobs. All that filters back to them. So they stole your money, gave you $50, and kept the rest of the $10,000 for themselves, and you're supposed to be grateful for that. It is such a they stole it, man. It is freaking criminal, and we just let them do it. It's insane. Now the rich aren't going to suffer like the rest of us are. They protect themselves. They're more sophisticated. The poor and the middle class generally don't have the liquidity, and we're not sophisticated enough to protect ourselves from inflation. The rich have no problem with inflation, generally speaking, especially the elites. I need to study why this is true, but I kind of have a vague understanding of it. But let's say, first of all, the rich don't buy things with their money. I run into this all the time when I'm dealing with rich people buying things, and I'm thinking, why are you financing this? You have plenty of cash. You could definitely just pay for it, but they don't do that. They finance everything. And especially in an inflationary period like we're rolling into, man, there's going to be some serious financing going on, debt spending. Because let's say you buy something that costs you $100,000 in today's dollars, and you put it on a 30-year note. So but inflation is running rampant. So there's lots of inflation. Again, the numbers aren't necessarily important. You'll understand it, I hope, although I barely. So inflation is running rampant. So they borrowed $10,000, $100,000 in today's dollars. It's worth $100,000 as we see it. And then they buy a real tangible asset. And then they finance it over 30 years. And debt generally is not indexed. I don't know if there's any debt that is indexed to inflation. I've never heard of it. Maybe there is, but I've never heard of it. And what index means is that you would pay more back. An index rate is when something is indexed, that means it's tied to something. And so for like an adjustable rate mortgage, an ARM, let's say, it's an index. A lot of ARMs are indexed to the LIBOR, the London Internal Banking, whatever. Anyways, the LIBOR. And so that's how it's that. So if the LIBOR goes up, your interest rate on your house goes up, that sort of thing. So there's a base index that changes overall. Well, debt's not indexed, so it's still $100,000. Well, they know that inflation is going to devalue the currency, so when they pay it back. They're paying it back in less valuable dollars that they're able to easily earn, and so they ended up paying a fraction of what $100,000 cost. And I've never looked into this. I wonder if lenders factor in inflation in their pricing of their. I mean, they would have to, right? I'll have to look into that. That's interesting. Maybe that's another topic. But that's one thing they do is they play the inflation game. They know that. They can buy lots of things knowing that and inflation is going to run rampant and they're going to pay it back with cheaper dollars later on. They also, you think about what the rich do. The rich, the corporations, the billionaires and the multimillionaires, they control the politicians. The politicians, whether or not they were millionaires when they become politicians, they are millionaires after they're politicians. They write the laws to protect themselves. They have the ability to get, they have the liquidity and the ability to do investments in a way to protect themselves from inflation. Most poor people and middle class have their assets in the form of cash savings or maybe a house. But they don't have a lot of assets that protect their money from inflation, that later on when they need liquidity, we can cash it in and get tomorrow's dollars that you didn't lose for inflation. So, if I have $10,000 in the bank, I can't go buy an expensive piece of art and tie that money up so that later on, in 10 years when I need that $10,000, I can sell that art, probably even went up in value, and get those new dollars, let's say, $20,000 of new dollars that are protected from, that haven't been devalued from inflation. I drive a 2003 pickup truck. I'm probably going to need to buy a new truck eventually, so I need that $10,000. I don't have $10,000 in savings, but if I did, I would need that $10,000 to buy a truck. I can't tie it up in some sort of very unliquid asset. And these rich people can. They buy high-valued real estate that is going to be protected from inflation due to appreciation. They buy high-value art and other goods, gold. They buy hard assets. And there's other types of investment products that are protected from. They own stocks, but there's other investment products that are specifically geared towards protecting from inflation. They can afford to buy all these things, and they have the lawyers and the tax professionals and the sophistication to protect themselves from it. We don't. We just, we're trying to file a 1040 and just make it through tax season without ripping all of our hair out. Obviously, I don't have any. I ripped it all out last time I did taxes. I do my own taxes. I can't afford to go pay a specialist to. Well, I don't have. My taxes are simple, so it'd be a waste of money anyways. I don't have I'm not a 1099. I'm just a W-2 kind of guy. So it's super easy to do your own taxes when you're W-2. The poor just don't have the sophistication or the liquidity to do that, and the middle class doesn't either. And so we are extremely affected by inflation. It takes so much of it keeps us from getting out of the hole. They know this, and they like that part of it. They need a poor consuming working class. That is, the middle class is the greatest danger to them. When you get a middle class that actually has some leisure time and some spare money and the ability to educate themselves, that's the most dangerous thing to these elites and these crony capitalists and these leftists. They definitely don't want that. They want the smallest middle class as possible, the largest poor class as possible. They want debt slaves. That's what they want. They want people they want them enslaved by debt or enslaved by inflation, which is the worst kind of tax. It's just another tax. They're taking your money and throwing it out there, and you owe that money back. And then it is so insidious because not only you're going to have to pay that money back. We, the American people, are going to have to pay all that debt back somehow. It has to get paid back, right? So it's going to get paid back in the form of taxes and lost production. And then the inflation is a tax on top of that tax. So it is destroying the middle class, and it is destroying the poor and just making them poor, making them harder to get out of it. They're using your money to buy you. That's all they're doing. They're using your money, and that's beyond. It's not even that anymore. It's not your money anymore. They're using your grandchildren's money to buy your vote and to buy your complacency and to buy your lack of revolt. Because that's what they want. They just want to keep you dumb, and they want to make sure you have a TV. Because our poor is not poor compared to the history of Earth. Not even poor compared to the vast majority of the world today. Our poor today would be considered the elites. You go back just a few hundred years. Just the dental care that our poor have today is better than the greatest kings had in the olden days. So yeah, our poor are better off than in America, are better off than the rest of the world, and definitely better off than anything in history, including the elite. But that's something for another story. But it is keeping you proportionality. It's keeping you in proportion to their money and their advantages. They're keeping you as far down the ladder as possible, and they're doing this on purpose. And they're doing this to your children, your grandchildren. For me, I'm 46. I got that right this time. I'm 46. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I've got, I'm halfway through my life probably, especially with my health. I'm halfway through. I hope I'm only halfway through. That'd be a success story if that's true. 40? Yeah, that would, yeah, for sure, 100%. Yeah, I would love for this just to be the halfway mark. I'm not one of those people who want to die. I'd want to live forever. I love life. I have so much fun, even though I'm frustrated with the world we live in. And a lot of people would say that I'm a negative person. It's not. I'm not. I'm just sarcastic, and I'm very realistic. And I don't show a lot of enthusiasm, maybe, but I'm always just pretty content and happy, and I always have fun, and I always feel blessed. And whenever I'm driving to work in my 2003 pickup truck, it doesn't have air conditioning, I always pass by these homeless people. There's one homeless person that has in a wheelchair, and I don't even think they have legs. And I think, man, thank you, God. I'm so blessed. Even though I have to work 50, 60 hours a week, and I have, at least I get to work. At least I'm not in a wheelchair on the side of the road begging for my dinner that day. No matter how bad you are, trust me, go sit in an emergency room in the poor hospital, and you'll see how blessed you are. But this the what they're doing to our children is what's super frustrating me. Not me myself, because like I said, I feel blessed, even in my current situation. But my children and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren, I think about that because what does it mean to be a parent, anyways? What does it mean to be a human being? But because you're only here for a fraction of a second, fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second is your existence. So you want to leave something behind. And the only thing is humanity we can leave behind, unless you're a pharaoh and you build a giant pyramid, whether they're aliens or not. Anyways, unless you're a pharaoh and you build a giant pyramid, the only thing you can leave behind is your children being in a little bit better situation than you. And they know that, but they take that away from you. They take it away from your children's future with inflation and debt spending and all these monetary policies and this crony capitalism and all these barriers they throw up. They throw up these huge barriers so that you can't invest properly. You can't, you have to have like $25,000 in your stock account in order to become a day trader. You can make money at day trading. I have no idea how the stock market works, and I did okay at it for a little while I was willing to invest the huge amount of time, and I'm playing with small dollars. Like I think I put $500 in there, and I took that $500 and making small trades, but pretty slow enough that I didn't get the whole day trading moniker on my account, but pretty fast. And I turned it into $2,000 in a month, basically. To be honest, most of that profit came from one transaction. I bought some something stock, Bionanical, something, I don't know. I just looked at the chart, and it was like at the bottom of the chart, and it was a real company that had some news about it. So I thought, well, it can't go any lower. If it went any lower, it'd just be bankrupt. And it seems like they're not going bankrupt. So I bought some stock, and it went up to like 17. I bought it for less than it was pennies. It was like a penny stock. It went to like $17 a share. So I made like $1,000 on that. So that was the majority. But I'm just saying that even quickly in a month, not knowing anything what I'm doing, I was able to make some money at the stock market. I don't really play it anymore. Because I just don't have the time to really look into it. And, you get that stupid warning that you're a day trader and you can't. They put a lot of barriers up to prevent us workers, us producers, the work. They want a poor consumer class is what they really want. But us working class, us producers out there, they put a lot of barriers so that we can't climb out of our situation. And I'm not trying to be a victim, because I don't believe in that whole victim mentality. No matter what barriers they put up, you can climb out and you can do it. I am about 1,000,000 billion times better off than my parents were at this time of their life, or any time of their life, truthfully. I mean, we were very poor. My wife always says, you need to talk about your childhood and where you came from. People won't believe it, and you need to express where you're at in life compared to where you came from. Man, but that was my childhood. What do I care? Nobody cares about other people's problems in their childhood. Well, as soon as you turn 18, you got to stop blaming your parents for your life and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go out there, no matter how bad your upbringing was or how far. I saw that analogy, which kind of made sense to me, where it was a foot race to the finish line, and they had the poor folks who had no education in the back, and as the economics, of the socioeconomic status of the people went up, they were closer and closer to the finish line, like, okay, start the race. And then of course the elites at the front, had to make a few steps, and they won. I get that. That's a true statement, but it's still just an excuse. You can still do so much. I've done so much. My parents have never owned a house. I own a house. Again, in America, you don't really own anything. You have to pay your taxes. Mortgage company owns it for 30 years, and at the same time, you're renting it from the government. I get it. But I own a house. I have 2 cars. I have, everything that a typical middle-class person would want. So I'm 1,000,000 times better off than my parents have ever been. So I have grown, and I did that all on my own. I didn't have any help on that. No one helped me with that. That was all me. And I want my children to be much better off, because they will go to college and they will have me constantly berating them to do better. And then hopefully their children will be even better off. And so I ended a cycle that could have been horrible, and started the cycle going a different direction. I changed the trajectory of my family's and my children and my descendants' life, hopefully. That's all you can do, really. And they want to, and inflation is one of the tools they use to keep that from happening, to keep you from doing that sort of thing. They have to, if you look at how the fractional reserve banking, and you look about how this crony capitalism works and how they're moving it more and more and more towards socialism, we do not live we don't want to live in a democracy, first of all. Research democracies and all the horrible things they've done. But we don't live in a constitutional republic like we're supposed to. We're basically in a social democracy at this point, moving fully towards socialism, which will then move to some sort of Marxism, communist type thing. I don't know if our Constitution will be able to protect us from that or not. I hope, but nobody even looks or pays attention to it anymore, so I doubt it. I guess the only hope would be you live in a state, and the state may be able to resist what's going to happen, and maybe you'll be safe in your state. I read an article a long time. It was kind of racist, but the gist of it wasn't. It was just how they kind of described the future was a little racist to me. But it basically said we'd all be ending America would end up as city-states. And they didn't really mean state-states. They meant like really large cities that where the elites lived, where there was all this technology. And I read this a long time ago. I'm talking, I was probably in my early 20s, so 20 years ago plus. And this guy said there would be these nice, huge cities full of the rich, the educated, the elite, a technology class of people, and they'd be surrounded by third world nation. He was coming at it, I think, from a racial point of view, but I didn't take that point from it. I took the point of, what, it is going to end up that way, but it's going to end that way not because of some color of somebody's skin, but because of social economic status, because what they're going to do with everybody's with the economies. They're going to make everybody debt slaves. That's what they're going to do. And it doesn't mean, debt slave doesn't necessarily mean that you owe a bunch of money, like a debtor's prison. It's also because of the fact that you're a working poor. That's a form of debt slave. You're just, I've heard wage slave kind of thing. And don't get offended because I'm using the word slave. We got to be a little bit more nuanced and sophisticated in our conversation. And so, I picked that up out of that guy's article, and it leads me to another point, and then I'll move on since we're so far off our topic right now. But I keep reading all these books, and a lot of the books I feel like it's a waste of time because I'm downloading free books just because I'm cheap, I guess. I'm not cheap, actually. My wife constantly says if I want something, I just go buy it on him, shop for the best price. But, I'm just downloading it because there's so many of these free books on Audible. I do suggest Audible for people who drive and just don't have time to in a quiet spot to read. I love reading, and I've physically read thousands of books. Love it, but I just don't have time for a quiet little spot to read anymore where I can just, do that. I fall asleep at night, first of all. I'll go to bed, and then, there's just no other time I have. Kids, wife, everything going on. I just don't have it. So I can listen to these books while I'm driving to and from work, or from at lunch, in the restroom. It doesn't matter. You can listen to these books. And, or right before you go to bed, just 5 minutes before you go to bed. And I'm listening to a lot of these books that are either, they're boring, they're beyond me, or they're kind of dated, but I'm still getting little tidbits. And I'm realizing the importance of continuously educating yourself, even if you could never write an essay on the book, or you could never, debate somebody on the topic. You pick. I just read a book on future of democracy was maybe what it was called, and he used a lot of terms like a liberal democracy, and he uses it differently than today. He meant it in terms of like a democracy where people's individual rights and freedoms were protected. But he said some things in there that, even though it's completely dated and kind of lost respect for the book when he was talking about nation building of like Iraq and things. He wrote this before Saddam Hussein had been toppled. And the intervening in the Middle East that he was talking about turned me off to the book, but I still picked up a lot of little just tidbits, just little ones and twos from there. And now I'm reading a book about education, listening to a book about education. I'm sure I'll pick one or two. You've gotta grow somehow, man. You cannot be stagnant. That's what they want. They want you watching the latest sitcom. And I don't watch the latest sitcom, but I do watch a lot of YouTube, and I download a lot of movies and stuff. So I watch a lot of, science fiction stuff. So I do waste time. I waste the majority of my free time. But you've got to be growing. You've got to be growing so you can understand these games they play with your future and your children's future. So you can understand why, a debt-based economy with a fractional reserve banking system and, this inflation tax that they keep throwing in, why it's a problem, and understand why it's a problem so that you can vote right. So understand that the politicians didn't give you a gift of COVID stimulus. They stole your money, gave you back a little bitty tidbit, gave the rest of it to themselves and their friends, and then passed that along to your children, your grandchildren, so that they'll be suffering all the time, cackling and laughing how stupid you are, that you are so fighting for them to give you more money. And they're just like, yeah, we'll give you more. Keep voting for us. Keep giving us 90% of your production. We'll give you back 10% of it, and you're going to thank us for it because you're uneducated and stupid. That's how they look at us. That's how they look at all of us. And we got to change that. Well, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Producing Half, where we attack things from a worker's point of view, a producer's point of view, without getting too deep in the woods. I'll see you again soon, hopefully. Have a nice day.